I'm going to talk about it. So yeah, I'm sure some of you are wondering, Mason, what is this game? What are you talking about? I've never heard of it. And well, for those 3 or 4 of you that are going to watch this video, that's exactly why I want to talk about this, because it needs to be talked about. Because I've not heard a peep about this game. And then one of the Let's Players I watch on YouTube, Nico B, he starts playing this game, and based on his comments on Twitter and stuff, and based on like some of the stuff he was saying in the other game he was playing at the time, he kept praising the hell out of this game. And I was just like, I mean, if it's that good, if he's talking about it that much, I might as well see what it's all about. So here we are. I've played it all the way through, and it's a fantastic game. I really am shocked that nobody's really talking about it. Because, like, I don't know. Most of the time, whenever there's a game like this that is very rich in character and story and design, I mean, most of the time there's like kind of that cult following of people that are just like, you need to check out this game. Like, everybody needs to play this game. And it's not going to be for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this game is not for everyone. There's a specific group of people that I know are going to love the hell out of this game. And then there are going to be some that are just your Call of Duty or your Madden, your FIFA, those type of players. Probably won't get as much enjoyment out of this. But for those people that love story driven games, this is for you. 100% this is for you. The story is fantastic. The characters are all very well written. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to dissect. So that's kind of my overall thoughts. Uh, I'll go ahead and give a quick, I guess, spoiler free talk, and then talk a little bit more about kind of the ending and some of my thoughts on that. For those of you that are watching this and have played all the way through, again, I'm probably going to get 3 or 4 views on this because nobody watches my channel and this game is not that popular. So we'll see what happens. But first of all, one thing I want to talk about, the art design in this game. I actually got to have this little book with the one that I got. And I mean, just look at some of these designs. You know, like some of the character designs, just, it's beautiful to look at. You know, some of the characters are beautiful in their own right. But like, I don't know, they're all just, they've got their own unique style. You could, it takes maybe a couple hours of playing before you kind of like get everybody's personality and everybody's character down. The names are going to take probably a while unless you're used to seeing Japanese names, because I mean, I'm not. So I'm sitting there going, okay, his name Takatoshi, okay, all right, that's Shu Amaguchi, okay. So there are going to be some moments like that, but each character is so well designed that I could clearly tell, all right, so this is that guy, this is that guy. Like, they're very unique, and it just made it so much easier for me to grasp onto the characters, because you can have a well written character, but if you're making a video game and the design of your character is just sort of bland and generic, and you're just looking at it like, oh yeah, you know, I guess I recognize him. Like, it's not going to stick out as much. But these characters, they're, from their clothing down to the, you know, the hair, the face. I mean, all of it is just so well designed that it just makes it easy to latch on to these characters and get invested in their stories. And on top of that, the art in the background as well. I mean, I unfortunately still not very good with editing, still not very good with putting stuff into these videos. So hopefully something I can do later. But for right now, all I can really tell you is the art in the background of these games, and you know, the sets, the scenes, all of them are just so beautiful to look at. Like, if you want to look up maybe some just screenshots, I recommend it because it's gorgeous. Like, it almost looks like a painting sometimes, but like a moving painting, and it's just really incredible to look at. So art, 100%, I think the best part of this game. Like, it's very unique, it's very stylized specifically. Apparently, from what I've heard, some of the stuff that I've read, this sort of company, Vanillaware, this is their type of style. You know, very artsy, very art directed. And I'm not a very artsy person, so I can't talk too knowledgeable about it. But even having not really a very art styled mind, I can still look at this and say this was gorgeous. As far as the characters are concerned, I mean, again, all of them are very well written. The voice acting on it is fantastic. A lot of people that I'm used to hearing from playing games like Persona and Danganronpa, those type of voice actors that you see typically in these English dub games, they all got on it. And apparently, something I just found out after I finished the game is that the voice director had to jump through a lot of hoops to get them to record it because of everything that happened with COVID. Um, so kind of incredible that this game got released with the English dub in the way it did. A lot of them had to record from home, and then the people working on the sound behind it and the voice, editing and stuff. I mean, they had to put a lot of work in to make it sound as good as it does, and it does. There are some English dubs that you got those one or two characters that maybe sound a little flat, or you've got those people that are clearly putting on a really weird voice, to just be a side character or something. But this one, like, even the side characters, they still have like very normal voices, but they all have a very distinct sound to them as well, so you can pinpoint who's speaking, at that moment. So I really think that they did a really good job with making these characters unique, giving them voices behind it that made them even more unique, and they were just really lovable characters. I don't think there's a single character in here that I didn't like. As far as the main cast is concerned, there are a couple on the side that you're not supposed to like. They're kind of not good people. So they do a good job of making you dislike a couple. But as far as the main cast is concerned, there are even a couple on here that I thought for sure I'm gonna hate this guy. Like there's Shu Amaguchi is kind of like the typical playboy. Like all the girls love him. He's just like, oh yeah, I'm so cool. But in reality, that's not him. Like he's actually kind of nerdy, and he also enjoys like the sci-fi stuff. And there's this one girl that you wouldn't think he'd be interested in that he turns out he was interested in at one point. And I don't know, like they just make him so likable that even though I don't typically like that type of character, that what's it called, archetype, I guess, I don't typically like that. They still did a good job of making him likable enough to where I didn't care. Whenever he was kind of being very loose and like flirting with people he probably shouldn't be, I'm still just like, I'm still enjoying it because the way he plays it off and the voice acting and all that, it just makes him still very likable. A couple of characters that they're sort of throughout the game, you're kind of wondering what their motives are. They seem very out there, and you're not sure if you can trust them. You're not sure if they're making good decisions. And then by the end of it, they all come around and they all show that one moment that makes you really relate to them. So I really feel like they did a good job with the writing, a lot of them, because again, some of these characters are very easy to not like based on their character and their archetype. But ultimately, they did a good job of making me really like all of the main cast and then even most of the side cast as well. As far as the story goes, again, this is where I think a lot of people will probably either really latch on or really be turned off. If you're a story-driven type of gamer, you'll really like this. The story is very interesting. It's very unique in my opinion. Like, when I say unique, it's not unique as like it's never been done before. Like, I can't get too much into details without spoiling, but yeah, there's been a lot of stuff I'm like, okay, I've seen this in other things before, but the way that it's set up and the way that the gameplay sort of plays into the story is very unique. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a game set up quite like this, because you have story sections where you basically go through and you find out more pieces of the story. You have flashbacks, you have other points where you're just kind of finding out information about what's going on with the characters and with the world overall. And then you have the destruction sections where essentially you jump into a giant robot and you fight off kaiju. Pacific Rim, what do you know? But even those sections still have some story beats in it that tie into what's going on. And sometimes you have to finish one character story to unlock another character story, and then sometimes you have to finish a certain level in the destruction area to be able to lock another character story. And then sometimes you can't progress in the destruction level until you've completed a certain part of the story. So they do a good job of making sure that you're finding out information when you need to. And there are even some times where it can literally play into, you just watched one scene with the character and it maybe ended prematurely. And I got lucky on a couple of them where the next scene that I watched just happened to be from another character's point of view that immediately followed that scene that just ended. So it's very interesting how it's set up that way, and sometimes it can work out where basically you just watch the scene to its conclusion. So yeah, very clever setup in the way they do it. And again, I've not seen a game set up like this before. It does make it very interesting as far as replayability value as well, because you can go back through after you're done with everything and sort of watch it from beginning to end, because a lot of the stuff is very out of order. You're not sure exactly when some things are happening. I love stories like that where you can sort of go back through and say, all right, start from the beginning. Let's watch this from beginning to end and see exactly when some of this stuff happened and how some of it transpired. But again, if you're not somebody who really likes story based games, probably not going to be for you, because this is a very story heavy game. And I will say also, if you're somebody who maybe you prefer just kind of you're not so much a Christopher Nolan type of watcher, you're more of like a Michael Bay type of watcher, probably not going to get into this story either, because it is very much, people are talking about, oh, Tenet is so confusing. I still haven't seen it. Honestly, I imagine it's going to be something like this game. There's so much of this that the first time you watch, I was so confused. I'm sitting there for at least half of the game going, I have no idea what's going on. I'm so confused. They do give you little archives that sort of help summarize certain things, but overall, like, it still leaves you very confused until the very end. It sort of wraps up everything very nicely. And you're just kind of like, okay, I think I understand what happened now. But if you're not really somebody who enjoys being confused and trying to figure out complex stories, probably not a game for you as well. But as far as all the rest of it is concerned, the gameplay on the fighting in the Sentinels and fighting against the monsters, honestly, I kind of like it. It's pretty simplified. There's a little bit of strategy to it because you can only pick 6 of the 13 that you get to control, and there are certain Sentinels can have more abilities than the others. So there's some that are long range, there's some that are up close fighting, like punching. There's some that are a bit of a mix, and then there's some that are more aerial combat. So I like the fact that they have different types of Sentinels as well, and even in that, some of them have abilities that the other Sentinels of the same generation may not. So one guy could have a super missile that just blows up a large area, and then the other one could have something that allows them to make their next move faster. But it's kind of a turn-based system where you have to wait for their next move. Certain moves take longer to recover from, so it's very, if you've played like a Final Fantasy type game, or I'm trying to remember, there was another game that reminded me of that I can't remember now what it was, but basically kind of that wait to move and wait to act. It's pretty simplified, and unfortunately, because it's not really a high. I didn't expect it to be super in depth as far as the graphics are concerned, and super like, oh yeah, I'm expecting to see these amazing fight scenes between the robots and the kaiju. They didn't have that. It's more like little pixels of your guys on the screen, and then you can, the little pixels of the enemies are coming, and you see where they are, and you have to shoot that way. And it's pretty simplified, but I think it still works for what it is. I think it still looks good. It still has that kind of art style to it, that fits the rest of the game. So I'm not too upset about the fact that they didn't do more detail in the fights. And honestly, there's still some things I haven't finished in the fighting. Like, they have another section that opens up after you beat the game, which I think is supposed to be kind of, each one has something different. Like, the first one has more ground based, second one has more aerial, third one has more like, I don't know, fighting based. It has all a bunch of different monsters that you can fight. So I think that's something that just sort of, if you want to keep fighting, if you want to keep playing and keep upgrading your people, this is a good way to do it. So, but yeah, all in all, again, like I said, very good game, very enjoyable, very engaging as well. But that's kind of where the spoiler-free section of this video is going to end. So, again, if you've not played it, if you don't want to know anything, stop here. I really recommend it. I really think it's a game that you should check out because it's so good and it's so fun and engaging story. There's just so much about it that, again, I'll get into a bit more in a second, that you got to experience it. Like, you really have to go in and just see what it's all about and find out just what the whole story is. And And again, just experience some of these characters and experience some of the interactions between them, because that's really what a lot of this game is as well. So, anyways, with all that being said, spoiler time. Yeah, a lot of the ending, it really satisfied me. Like, I kept wondering how it was all going to end. I kept wondering, are they going to get Operation Aegis to happen? Are they going to, close the loop? What even is the loop? A lot of the twists, there are so many twists that, like, some of them are easier to predict, and some of them I was just so blown away by. Some of them didn't have a single hint. That I think the probably the most out there twist that didn't expect it all, but also I don't think they really hint at it except for one time, is finding out that Tsukasa Okino is actually Professor Chihiro Morimura's son in the future. And it was from, like, she gave her egg and he was born out of that. That was about the only twist that I was just kind of like, okay, there was no hints for that at all. Like, there was no setup. It was just kind of like, oh, by the way, he's her son, and it didn't really pay off anything. It was just sort of thrown in there. I don't know. But no, a lot of the twists, finding out about Shiba being actually Izumi inside of Juro, I kind of expected that somewhere, after the first scene with them, whenever he kind of wipes Juro's mind, whenever he activates the Sentinel, there was definitely, like, a suspicion that he wasn't who he said he was. That was pretty obvious. But as, like, I kind of went through a couple other scenes with Juro, and I went through a couple scenes with, like, Iori and Tomi, there was starting to become a pattern where I kept seeing Juro by himself. And I was like, wait, but he's always with Shiba, isn't he? And that's when it kind of hit me. I'm like, oh, Shiba's in his mind, isn't he? And then, finding out more, getting into more detail, I started to realize that it was probably, Prisoner 426, Juro Izumi, and sure enough, that's what it was. I also kind of had a feeling, I don't know, I wasn't sure if he was definitely Prisoner 426, but I had a feeling that Izumi wasn't really a bad guy. And as we come to find out later, he did some bad stuff, but his motives were actually good, finding out about his desire to sort of stop the loop because he realized it was part of the problem. I kind of guessed that as well. Finding out that Chihiro was actually, like, Iori, I don't know, that was kind of weird. I didn't really understand why she put, like, two clones of herself in this world or in this loop. That part for me was a little bit kind of like, wait, why? Like, I don't know if they ever really explained it. If they did, maybe I just missed it. But it seemed weird that, like, Fuyusaka... Wait. I actually think they did. I think they talked about she was going to take over Fuyusaka's body at some point. If I remember right. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Because Fuyusaka had the ability to control Sentinel. And so Chihiro, the little girl Chihiro, was going to take over her body because she was the professor. Again, this is why this story is, like, very complex. There's so much to it, and that there's going to be things I know I'm going to forget here. But I just kind of wanted to talk about, like, my favorite plot twists and stuff, and some of the ones that maybe didn't really connect with me as well. There are two other plot twists. That one was the Ogata, not Nenji, but his son, I think, or no, his father maybe, Kengo Ogata. That didn't really go anywhere. I really thought that was going to go somewhere because it said he was still alive as an AI in the computer, in that one scene with Goto. So I really thought that was going to go somewhere, and it just didn't. It just kind of popped up, and it's like, oh yeah, he has a father who apparently was evil, and he's the one that sort of manipulated Morimura into do all of this stuff and basically dooming humanity. So I really thought he was going to be more impactful on the story. I was wondering if maybe his AI had taken over somebody, or if he was somehow affecting something. But in the end, he just didn't ever appear again. He appeared in that one scene, just kind of as part of this is why humanity was doomed in the first place, and then he never showed up again. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. The other thing was everything to do with Ida as well. I don't know, there were parts of Ida's story that I felt were very interesting, And it was kind of interesting to see, because there was even that scene where he was talking to Amaguchi. He was saying it's so. If I were in a, I don't remember exactly how to word it, but basically, if it was this were a different time from a scientist's point of view, it's very interesting. We're basically the same person, but we had different upbringings, and so we turned out to be completely different people. And I was just kind of like, that is very interesting. And I liked a lot of what they did with him and Amaguchi, but there were some elements of his story that I just felt like didn't really pay off. And even that scene at the end, we see him like he's in the UFO again, and he's talking to Mayuki Inaba, and basically saying, like, all right, yeah, we're gonna do this, and she's just like, oh yes, I've always supported you and all this, and I don't know, it kind of felt like I don't really know what his conclusion was, like because it seemed like after the next loop, all the AI were going to disappear, but it seems like maybe they managed to actually get them back, like the 15 that survived. They managed to get the AI back, and they were talking about putting them in the bodies. But for Ida, like, it kind of felt like that story didn't really conclude with anything. He's just sort of still there, and he's still talking to Mayuki Inaba, who's actually, Kisaragi's future AI self. And I don't know, it didn't really feel like his story led to much in the end. And I expected a bit more. He did have an impact on the story overall, but it just kind of ended. There was because there was a scene where he was killed, but then his AI was still alive in some android, and then I can't remember who it was that took him out. I think it was Yuki that took him out in the SIU building. Um, or maybe was it Yuki? I don't remember now. That scene is not coming to mind. But I just remember he had kidnapped somebody in his android body, and so he had to be taken out. But that's kind of the last we heard of him until the end, when suddenly his AI shows up again. I'm just kind of like, okay, what did he learn? Is he different? Is he the same? I don't know. Um, so that one didn't really lead anywhere either. But that's basically all as far as like the plot twist that I just, it's not that I didn't enjoy them, it's that I didn't grasp onto them as much, or I still had questions at the end of the game that I feel like they didn't answer. The rest of the plot twists and the rest of the story beats I felt like played out really well. Again, a lot of this game comes down to the character interactions. I feel like there were some moments where I'm kind of sitting there going, okay, all of this love talk and all of this, like, yes, oh yes, she's the one, or he's the one. Like, some of it I was just kind of like, okay, this feels like kind of sappy teenage love drama. But in the end, it did kind of work out because, for one, the characters are so enjoyable that I don't really mind hearing them talking about the person that they're with or that they're interested in. But also, it wasn't just that, oh, these are just high schoolers who think they understand love and they don't. It's a little bit more than that. They have the personalities, they have some of the memories and some of the ideas of their former selves, of who they were before, and that kind of plays into it. We do see Natsuno and Miura kind of gradually gravitating toward each other, and some of that could have been because of their past life, and then some of them, they just happen to find somebody else that interests them instead. With Amaguchi, he's not Ida, and that's shown in the fact that Kisaragi didn't really interest him, but Yuki did, and so he went after her instead. And there are just some matchups that I enjoyed watching. I enjoyed watching Takatoshi and Okina. Like, I'm not typically a fan of whenever they, if they try to force like a homosexual relationship or anything like that into a show or a movie. Typically it doesn't work out, but this was just, I don't know, like, it was played for laughs sometime, but there were also times where it actually was very heartfelt, and it felt like they really did care about each other. I was just kind of like enjoying watching them together. I'm looking at these characters again because I'm trying to make sure I don't like miss anybody. Um, I think Ryoko's story was also very interesting because she always seemed kind of like an outlier. You weren't really sure what her goals were. She seemed kind of like the antagonist sometimes. But in reality, it all came down to a very heartbreaking story where she just really cared about Tetsuya Ida, and he just didn't care about her. And it just, unfortunately it hurt her in the end. And it kind of plays back into her former self is also the one that tried to just get rid of humanity in the first place. So it's kind of interesting that she was included in the project to begin with. But at the same time, like, it very much fits that character as well. Like, she always seemed a little off and a little bit kind of messed up, and it's partially because she lost her memories, partially because she was hurt so badly by somebody she really loved. I'm just kind of like, yeah, it makes sense for her. Guto is another character who's kind of on the side, but I really enjoyed getting to see his story because you just see how intelligent he is and how he's kind of been watching a lot of the events play out, but he's been taking notes and he's been figuring out kind of what this setup is and what's happening and what everybody's trying to do and kind of what's the best path forward for everyone. So I really liked his inclusion because he seemed like that character that for most of the game you don't play as him. She's just sort of there and he's popping up in all these other character stories, sometimes as the antagonist, sometimes as, the guy that's helping out. And so when you finally start playing as him and you get to see a lot of the stuff that happened through his eyes, you really do get the sense that he's just basically been biding his time, taking notes, seeing everything that's been going on. And then in the end, he is trying to help everybody. And he is kind of the one that comes up with the idea to save everyone as well. So really good there. Some of the other characters, like everybody has their own story. And I don't want to take so much time and just talk about each character individually. But it really is like everybody has such good stories. Yuki, I loved getting to see her kind of work with Tamao and kind of looking for Natsuno. It's almost kind of like a mystery trying to find her and then ultimately finding out where she is at the end. It's a good wrap up for her story. Ninji, I really liked him experiencing like going through the same day over and over again at the train stop. It reminded me of like Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. Just every single time the thing ends and he gets sent back, he's just like, again. Kisaragi's story very much just kind of trying to fit in the new world, and then it leads to what was it? Because she was looking into something and I forget what it was now. I'm frustrated, I don't remember. Come back to it if I can remember. But Amaguchi, he's going after Yuki, but also he's kind of seeing a lot of the stuff going on with the SIU and some of the stuff going on with Ida as well, and he's talking to Inaba through the TV. Natsuno finds the little BJ robot, and a lot of the interesting travel she has with them, very much an ET type story, but she learns a lot of what's going on with the different sectors, and also working with Miura, who is, his story basically coming from another time and just experiencing everything going on and seeing how everything has changed and also trying to work with Natsuno and help her out. Very interesting how their story is very, very much aligned. Sekigahara, his was probably, for me, the most intriguing because there were so many questions that I had throughout most of it because there's so many questions he had. And very much a character that you can sort of put yourself in his shoes for a minute and be like, okay, I don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. So I feel like we're on the same page. So let's try to figure this out together. So I really like how they handled his story. And I like how it played out. There's a lot of it that you have certain opinions about. Is he the one that killed Chihiro? Did somebody order him to? Is he working? Who's he working for? And then you come to find out that he was working for Ida. He couldn't bring himself to do it. But then little Chihiro kills Miss Morimura. So, yeah, I don't know. I like how a lot of his story played out. And just, again, going into a character that has no clue what's going on, as the player who has no clue what's going on, it is very relatable. And you're able to put yourself in his shoes. Iori and Juro are kind of hand in hand. Like, I would say they're kind of considered the main characters only because Juro Izumi and Chihiro Morimura are basically kind of the ones that started this whole thing. And so the fact that those two, Juro Karabe and Iori Fuyusaka, are kind of the ones that start the game as well, it kind of makes sense, and it very much parallels. Like, I really like both of their stories. Seeing Juro kind of coming to grips with the fact that he is the clone of this Jiro Izumi, and finding out about Shiba, like all of that was very engaging. And then for Yori, she's kind of figuring out that a lot of her dreams did happen in the past. And then also kind of the A Sekigahara wasn't a huge fan of how that happened. It was just kind of like she bumped into him and then love at first sight. But ultimately, it ends up being very sweet. I really like how they handled their dynamic. But both of them are just kind of like unknowingly very important at the beginning, and then slowly kind of realize their importance in the entire world, and the loop and all that. So as far as Megami's story, again, she's a character that for most of the game I wasn't really sure how to feel about her. Like it felt like she was just so easily manipulated, and all because she loved Jiro. And again, some points of the story, there were moments where I'm just kind of like, oh my god, like stop talking about the love, please. Like it's too much. But then there are times whenever I felt like, okay, I can kind of understand why you feel this way because of when we finally see more of why she does care for him so much. But I don't know, it was kind of interesting, but also there were moments where I'm just kind of like, you got to be smarter than this, right? Because she's being controlled by this cat who you find out later is actually Jiro Izumi, and yeah, it was kind of interesting. I did like the plot twist of finding out that was Jiro also controlling her. I don't really know how he managed to do that. Like they did. I don't know if they ever explained why she was able to see the cat, because we know that Shiba, was implanted in Jiro whenever 426 jumped from the Tamao android into him. But why was Megami able to see the cat? I don't know if we ever really found that out. But finding out, like, that scene at the end with whenever she shoots herself and injects herself with the nanomachines, like, you really do get to see that the cat is Jiro, because the way he talks about her, you can kind of tell, yeah, he does care about her too. So, and then finally, Takatoshi, because he's the last playable character, obviously Okino very much plays into his story, and Mawataru? I don't know. I honestly, the Mawo-chan, who's friends with Iori and Kisaragi, I just kind of kept referring to as Haru, because it was Haru's voice actress from Persona 5, and she acted very much like Haru, very much interested in boys and always talking about love. And Haru had more depth to her than that, but the way she talked about boys and how nervous she got, I was like, this is Haru for me. But Takatoshi and Okino, both of their stories kind of intertwined as well. And again, I really like their dynamic. There were moments where you could tell Okino just enjoyed toying with him, because whenever he dressed up in the schoolgirl outfit, you could tell Takatoshi was just like trying not to be turned on, but also was, and was very confused about it. It is kind of weird to think about, because it's like, wait, but does that mean he's interested in guys, or is he just interested in girls? Because technically he thought he was a girl and he was interested in her, and there are moments where he sees like other beautiful girls and he's like, oh. I think probably my favorite part of the game, like the one part that I kept laughing at no matter how many times it happened, was the yakisoba pond with Takatoshi. It was amazing. I just loved running around as him, just going, yakisoba pond! And on top of that, the fact that he's voiced by the same guy that does Iwai, who's like the badass weapon seller in Persona 5, also made it funny to hear him like getting so tripped up whenever he talked about the yakisoba pond, like, oh, it's just so good. But yeah, like I like how their story sort of concluded. It was a little funny whenever they go back into the simulation and Okino's just like, you do realize this is a simulation, so I can change whatever I want. You know what he's implying? I'm just like, oh my god. But so I would say that story specifically was probably played a little bit more for laughs than the other stories. There were still laughs in all of them, but his especially definitely more funny, just because of his reactions and the fact that he is such a tough guy and seems like such a badass, but then he can get so easily flustered by a guy dressing up as a girl or yakisoba pond. It did make it really funny and really fun to experience his story. But yeah, so that's, again, I know I kind of went on forever about the characters, but they're so interesting individually. And I know Kisaragi, like, I think hers, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure hers was the one where they went back to her time, or her sector, um, 2025, and they were looking for Natsuno there. And she kept looking for Natsuno because she couldn't find her, I think is what it was. Or no, it wasn't Natsuno. They went there on accident, and then they got stuck there, and then they got back, and she was trying to find a way to get Miwataro to remember everything that happened because basically her mind was wiped. So that, I think that was her main story, was just kind of dealing with everything going on with Universal Control and trying to adjust to the fact that she is living in 1985 now. But just, I mean, everything to do with the time travel aspect, I did figure it out early. I did figure out that they weren't really time traveling, they were just jumping between the different five sectors. um, I I had an idea in my head whenever they started talking about waking up in the pods. I was like, God, this feels like the Matrix. I didn't actually think that was the case. I didn't think they were going to do that and make it where it's all just a virtual simulation. Just because I kind of felt like that would be a little too easy in the end. But I like how they did it. I like the fact it wasn't just a virtual simulation, and so like none of it mattered. It actually was impactful. Like the 15 of them were supposed to be learning from this virtual simulation, but then because of what Ryoko of the real world did and implanting this game into it and basically a virus, the Daimos kept showing up and kept resetting the world, so they could never wake up. They just kept looping again and again, and eventually the world was just going to break. And it was just going to cause them, basically the whole machine, to shut down, and they were never going to wake up. So yeah, I do like how they handled it. Even though it was all just a virtual world, I feel like it wasn't just a virtual world just so you could say at the end, oh well, none of it mattered in the end. Like it still all mattered. And they even showed when they went back to it and created all the AI again, and we're talking about making some of these people real. It wasn't just a virtual world to them. This was their real life. This was what they experienced. So I like how they handled it, even though it was a little cliche to make it all just simulation. Um, yeah, I really like how they handled it. I don't know. The one thing that I will say that I do need a little bit more clarification on. I did see something, like I was going through the event archives, and the last one said infinite futures or something like that, or infinite possibilities. And I watched it, and it's essentially the same beginning, but I think it was Ninji talking to Natsuno, and then she jumps in the Sentinel. Instead of at the beginning, we saw Juro seeing Fuyusaka jump into it. Um, so I don't know. I don't know what they're implying. Maybe they're implying that they sent multiple ships out to find worlds, which means maybe there's another planet that they found that was suitable for Earth, where basically it's doing the same thing as what happened in this game. So I don't know. Are we going to see maybe a different game with the same concept, same characters, but maybe instead of what happens in this one, maybe something else entirely? Maybe they never managed to get out of the loop and it just breaks down. I don't know. I don't know what that was implying. I don't know if I don't know. I have no theories. Like my brain is so fried from this story alone that I could not formulate any more theories about what that could possibly mean. Um, but anyways, I really enjoyed this game, and I really wanted to talk about it. I hope, if anybody did watch through the end, thank you. If you watched through the end but you didn't play the game, how dare you? um, but hopefully, this does reach some people, and it does help get the word out there about this game, because this really is a fantastic game, and I do think it deserves more credit than it's getting, because I don't think anybody's really played it or talked about it as much as they should have. So anyways, with all that being said, though, that's it for me. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on this game? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe. Future Sentinel, video games reviews. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.